It's often in a moment of crisis that leadership is truly tested, and we're reminded again and again that leaders really matter. In these last months of this coronavirus pandemic and in this last week of racial protest, I'm struck by how our leaders' decisions have literally been a matter of life and death. When we have strong leaders, they inspire us to call upon the better angels of our nature, to empathize with those who are suffering, to remember what unites us in the image of God. Real leaders lead us through our proverbial Red Sea. Real leaders make decisions that reinforce the value of every life, old and young, black and brown, vulnerable and strong. No one is left behind. Our tradition's leaders, from Abraham, Moses, Miriam, David, Deborah, Ben Gurion, Meyer, Heschel, they recognized that they were here to serve, not just their people, but to serve a higher purpose for humanity. Now, some people are born leaders, but I think many more are forged in the heat of a searing moment, awakened by an image or an event or injustice so great that something in them changes or snaps and cannot return to what was before. This is what happened to our greatest leader, Moses. Moses grew up with great privilege, raised in the Pharaoh's house. He was surrounded by Hebrews who served him, and his adopted father's entire house was built on the backs of slaves. Moses could have lived his entire life blind to the injustice and oppression around him. But one day, he saw a Hebrew slave strangled under the hand of an Egyptian taskmaster's whip, thrown to the ground. I can't breathe. And in that moment, Moses woke up. This horrific death sparked a violent rage and awakened a moral consciousness in Moses, planting the seeds of his calling to liberate our entire people from enslavement. Now, I cite this example with some trepidation because in the text, Moses responded in the moment by killing that Egyptian taskmaster. And then, realizing the irreparable damage caused by his rage, he flees. Now, I think this is a case where the Torah is not being prescriptive, as in this was the right thing for Moses to have done, but rather it's just being descriptive of the dangers of taking justice into your own hands. Our tradition understood the passion and fury of human nature, which we are seeing played out in our streets as I speak. But the real example of Moses as our people's greatest leader comes in this week's Torah portion, Baha'alotecha. Or at least it's this week's Torah portion in Israel and in some Reform communities. There are some diaspora communities who are doing a second Naso. Here in this week's portion, we will see Moses much later in his life as a leader. He's matured and grown, and he faces another crisis, this time in his own family. Moses has married a Cushite woman. The Rashi commentary makes it explicit that Cushite means she was black, like an Ethiopian. Moses' sister, Miriam, and brother Aaron complain, and they disparage him. Moses married a Cushite woman. God immediately chastises Miriam and Aaron and then afflicts Miriam with snow-white scales, something akin to leprosy. So here we have Moses facing racism within his own family, and Miriam is punished with a highly contagious plague that could threaten the entire people. Isn't it amazing how Torah seems to speak to our time? Now, how does our leader Moses respond? We know that the young Moses responded with violent rage. And certainly Moses had every right to be upset and feel betrayed by his own siblings. But this time, Moses pleads to God with 5 short words. El na, refana la. We just sang them. Please, God, Heal her, please. Our leader Moses puts aside his ego. He responds to this highly personal attack with a plea for healing, the very first healing prayer found in our Torah. Not only to save his sister Miriam, but to save everyone else, all of his people, from the plague as well. This is how he leads. This is why he's the model for leadership for us today. And we've seen some of these examples of healing leadership in these last weeks as well. I think of Chief Monahan of the New York Police Department, the NYPD. He went beyond his job of just keeping protesters in New York safe. He listened to them, he heard them, and he led them. This has got to end, he said. There is not a police officer over here that thinks that Minnesota was justified. We stand with you on that. And then he continued, but this is our city. Our city. We cannot be fighting. We have to live here. This is our home. And after delivering this impassioned message into an amplified microphone, Chief Monahan took the hands of two protesters, one on either side, and all together they dropped to one knee. Or I think of the words of Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms as rioting broke out over Atlanta a few days ago. She said, "I'm a mother to 4 black children in America, one of whom is 18 years old," she said. "And when I saw the murder of George Floyd, I hurt like a mother would hurt." In that moment of empathy, we all felt her pain and her humanity. She became our symbolic mother, and a strong one at that. She did not mince words. She said rioters were only making things worse for Black America. "This is not a protest," she said. "This is not in the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr. This is chaos." She exuded courage, clarity, and strength, making all of us who listened to her want to live up to our better angels, to the vision of America that she personified. In that charge to both empathy and responsibility, she became a healer, a mother, a leader for Atlanta and for all of us.